Have you been struggling with sleep, sugar cravings, unwanted belly fat, or just feeling a little more anxious than usual? It could be that your hormones may be playing a role and that by making a few changes, you could see big improvements. Join me and my guest, nutritionist and hormone expert Kylie Pinwill, and we're going to dive into all things hormone on the Thin Thinking Podcast. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking Podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Hello there. How are you doing this week? I just got back from a few days away. I was kind of working while I was away, but I really needed just to get out of town and have a bit of a break, if you know what I mean. We took my daughter up to college, and my husband and I just took an extra day and drove down the coast, and it was just really wonderful. I'm going to be heading into a very, very busy time in September through October. I'm just hitting the ground running. So right now I'm just trying to find out my Plan B self-care. You know what I mean? The Plan B self-care, the self-care which is good enough. You know, there's times when we can really focus and be on it and work out all we can work out and eat super duper healthy. And then I have found the importance of a Plan B, which is maybe not as much exercise and maybe is not of clean of eating, but good enough that keeps me healthy. So sometimes when I'm super busy, I just have my Plan B, which has turned out to be awesome because it's a lot better than no plan or throwing everything out the window and just eating whatever. So I highly, highly recommend for all of you out there that you cultivate a Plan B as well. So if you've been feeling out of sorts lately or, for the last year or so, more anxious, I've noticed more sugar cravings, even growing belly fat, well, you are going to love, love, love my guest today, Kylie Pinwill. We are going to dive into this world of hormones and what happens when they get out of whack. And also, she's going to give us some powerful steps to start to get them back in whack. You're really going to like Kylie. I can't wait for you to get into our interview. So let's just get going. Kylie is a clinical nutritionist, speaker, and host of the Hormone Hub Podcast with over 20 years experience in the health and fitness industry. She works with women in their 40s and beyond who are feeling lethargic, struggling with weight gain, bloating, and hot flashes. Well, she calls them hot flushes because she's from Australia. And she helps them balance their hormones and reset their metabolism so that they can feel happier, healthier, and more confident in their own skin. So let's get going. Hello and welcome, Kylie Pinwill, to the Thin Thinking Podcast. It's so great. Here you are halfway across the world and we can talk like this. Your lunchtime, my post-dinner time. I love it. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. I'm really excited to be here. And it is very cool that we can connect across the world.
Yeah, we were just talking about how amazing it is to connect in this way that as practitioners, we were seeing people just in our offices or in our clinics one-on-one, and now the whole world is available to us to connect to. It's so cool.
Yeah.
So, and I'm excited to introduce you to the Thin Thinking audience because Kylie, her jam is really hormones, perimenopause, menopause, all those things, those changes that we are going through with sleep and stress, weight, metabolism. And so I think you're all going to find our conversation really interesting. And Kylie, maybe you can start out by just telling us, were you always working with women in menopause, or were you working at how did you start your practice? Maybe just tell us a little bit about you and how you got started.
Yeah, of course. So I'm an accredited nutritionist, and I sort of started off, I was in clinic in Sydney, which is, sort of our big city in Australia. And that's the big smoke. And yeah, I was just in a busy clinic. So I was basically seeing anyone and any who would walk in the door, which, I loved. So big multimodality clinic. And then we moved to a regional area. So up, for those of who have ever heard of Noosa in Queensland, that's where I am now, which is a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. But when you're living and working here, it's actually a big country town. so I sort of, transferred in my head, I transferred my busy clinic in inner city Sydney to regional Queensland, and it didn't really transfer with the numbers. So all of a sudden I'm sitting in an empty clinic room, and I was like, oh, okay, where are the people, And I had sort of always had an interest in kids' nutrition, and, very passionate about, working with kids and the whole thing. And what I sort of realized was it was actually the kids were actually okay. It was the mums. The mums were tired. The mums were exhausted. The mums,
Right.
And when you had the conversation with the mums, it was just sort of like, oh, yeah, I'm really tired. Put on all this weight. I feel exhausted. I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been to the doctor and he said nothing's wrong. And so it sort of started, I guess, organically through these conversations. And then I kind of hit my own hormonal wall, if you will, where, all of a sudden I just realized, and I will never forget this particular conversation one day where this lady was telling me how she felt. And she was basically reflecting back to me how I felt. And I was sort of looking at her, and she was telling me, how tired she was and the weight around the middle that she'd never had before. And she was cranky with her kids, and she wasn't sleeping. And I was sort of looking at her and I was like, oh my God, that's how I feel. but being a health practitioner, we never sort of want, I think,
to admit,
we never want to admit, that we don't feel that great and something's going on. And, particularly when you do go to the doctor, and I hear this all the time, is, all of a sudden women start feeling off. And I think one of the early signs, and I know this now, is feeling tired. Closely followed by, where is this weight around my middle coming from?
Right.
So that was sort of like how I sort of started. And I started to get really curious about what was going on and, sort of digging a bit deeper. And at college, when I, was starting to be a nutritionist, like we seriously covered perimenopause and menopause for, I think, 5 minutes. It was just something.
Really?
And I think, honestly, I think it was. And I think in my head too, I was like, that's old lady stuff. So I just kind of like parked it in the back of my head and never really paid attention until it was happening to me.
Then all of a sudden it's fascinating, right?
Oh yeah, endlessly fascinating.
Interesting. I have a question about because I really want to hear dive into how you kind of brought that around, but with kids and their moms. So because I find it's interesting. I don't work with a lot of children, but when you're treating a child or giving, working with nutritionally with a child, you really are working with the mom, aren't you? Because they're feeding the
Oh,
child and they're being the role model
100%.
in a way, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, I used to see kids for a number of different reasons. Some of it was weight management for the
Mm-hmm.
kids, or not weight management so much, but, like a family plan. How do we put a family plan together?
Right.
And then there are also kids with specific needs. So kids on the
Yes.
spectrum, kids with food sensitivities,
Right.
textural sensitivities, things like that. So, but yeah, so big in Sydney, but yeah, I didn't see a huge amount of it in, once I moved. And then what happened was some of my clients from Sydney started contacting me to sort of
Mm,
say, oh, you and I had this conversation a while ago when I brought my son in, and now I think I need some help. And so, yeah, so I went from, having no one in my clinic to all of a sudden I'm sitting in the clinic and I'm doing all these online appointments, in Sydney. And
right.
yes, so that was sort of how my online kind of presence came about. Was, yeah, I couldn't get the people physically into my clinic,
Right.
but I was attracting. It started with my old clients, and then they would tell friends, so they were all booking in
Right.
online,
Right.
all before COVID, and
Right.
then I sort of realized that, working in that online space, we could actually create this container where, rather than, a lady come in and have a one-off appointment with me, and I may or may not see her in a month's time. And I was sort of always wondering, did she like that? Did she get something out of that? Did that work for her? Did it not work for her? Always wondering. So then I was able to sort of build, um, into a 12-week container where we were able to sort of touch on, so much more than just the food side. We could touch on the mindset, we could touch on the stress management, we could
Right.
go deeper into sleep, we could go further into, all of these aspects. So very much, or a lot more holistic, I think,
Right.
than just that one-on-one appointment.
Well, tell me, so back up a little bit and tell me, like, if I didn't know anything about menopause, like I'm past
Yep.
menopause now, but like if what happens in the body when like, tell us a little bit about the dance
Yeah.
we enter into in the world of, take us through that journey of the what
Yeah.
the body does, and then I'd like to touch upon like stress and sleep and hear more
Yeah.
specifically, but give us an overview of like menopause and perimenopause and
Yeah.
what it's all about.
Yeah, of course. And that's the thing. We're never taught. At no point in our life does anyone ever sit us down and
No.
tell us about perimenopause or menopause. We joked about this before we went
Yeah.
live about, all I ever knew about menopause was, this hushed voice. Oh, she's going through the change. And that was it. Like, I remember my grandma, and I remember thinking, what change is she going through? Like, and totally not understanding.
Right.
Um,
And it's so
but yeah,
shameful. Like there's this shame, even I felt, I don't know if you felt like, is there a
yeah,
weird, this like, oh, it's almost like I'm human too. Like I succumbed to
yeah,
this change in my body, like
yeah,
in my mind,
yeah,
because I think you feel like the 40s are so, in the prior to menopause, you're feeling great. You're feeling, if you are healthy, you're feeling
yep,
vibrant and you're
yep,
wise because you're not in your 20s like who the hell am I, what am I, you've gotten
yep,
some traction in your life, and then all of a sudden, like you said, you hit this wall, and
yep,
and then it's like, wait, I'm not the on top of it amazing, like now I can't remember stuff, and now my sleep,
yeah,
and now, yeah, like you said, like all this stuff is
yeah,
going on with my body, help me, and you feel
yeah.
vulnerable all of a sudden, very
Oh,
vulnerable.
yeah, very much so. So, we don't just wake up one day and we're in menopause. So
Right.
if just to sort of give you a bit of context, so perimenopause is like the 10 or so years leading up to menopause.
Yeah.
So this is where we have the biggest fluctuations in our hormones, and this is where we also have the biggest symptoms. But where there's this kind of, I think it's a big, not problem, but where there's this big disconnect is perimenopause isn't a diagnosable medical condition. So we can't go to our doctor, we can't just do a test and we're definitively in perimenopause. So perimenopause is, I've got a guide that I put together for, the ladies in my community, and I got together over 50 different symptoms.
Wow.
Of perimenopause and menopause, and it's different for everyone. So I'm yet to meet two women who go through with the same experience. So what starts to happen is, where ideally we're having this beautiful 28-day menstrual cycle. Potentially this sets us up to have a baby. Great. Or not.
Right.
And then what happens is, that balance of estrogen and progesterone, which, are two of the key hormones that give us our menstrual cycle, they start to behave differently. So our progesterone, if we think of progesterone as our happy, calming, beautiful hormone, so that it's a sweet spot. So that drops. So if you've experienced PMS before, it's due to that drop in progesterone. So that progesterone is like having the rug pulled out from under us.
Right.
But then what happens at the same time is we get these high levels of circulating estrogen in our body. And estrogen is great, and I'll get into that in a sec, the benefits of estrogen, but when we have too much of this high circulating estrogen, it can be quite inflammatory. So this is where we start to get, really heavy periods, or really, that irritability, that, breast tenderness, the mood swings, so this is sort of the start of that roller coaster, and it's generally that low progesterone. So we've lost our happy, calming hormone. We've got high estrogen. And because of that imbalance between those two, we become more susceptible to stress. We become more susceptible to insulin resistance. We become more susceptible to, like mood changes and things like that. So we've got these fluctuating hormones going on in the background. Now, over time, as we head towards menopause, our, estrogen levels drop, and then that's where we might experience, not sleeping, night sweats, hot flashes, things like that. So the other sort of symptoms start to kick in, and it's mental, physical, emotional. So this is where some women, for the first time in their lives, start to experience anxiety. Because they've lost that stability of their hormones. So, their anxiety kicks in, that overwhelm. And I think it sort of coincides, with a really busy time in our life.
Yes.
So, we've got careers, we've got partners, we've got children, and those kids might be teenagers or they might be young adults, but they still need us, probably more than ever, really.
Right. And aging parents as well sometimes.
Aging parents, and then you throw in pandemics, and you throw in like all of the stuff on top.
Right.
We carry this enormous load. And I think women in general, like kudos to us. I think we've got this incredible capacity to just take on all of the things. And we've got this extraordinary capacity just to push through. So we might be exhausted. We might feel like we have just got, we feel completely depleted, but we push through because we've got this massive, big task list of things that we just because
it's not an option not to do those things. I mean, really,
totally. It's not an option not to do them. So we just push through, and we push through, and then we're dead on the couch at the end of the day. And then we go to bed and we're awake for 3 or 4 hours in the middle of the night. And then we've got to get up and do it all again. And it's just this cycle that we get into. And I think, and I had a really funny conversation the other day with a client, and I said to her, she was telling me about her dog, and her dog had started limping. So she took it to the vet, and then it had to have x-rays. So they did the x-rays. And this is a client who had taken a long time to sign up with me. And I said to her, I said, okay, so you've taken the dog to the vet, same day. And I said, yeah, I probably would too. And I said, what about the kids? Like, if one of your kids was limping around, how long until you sought help for the kids? And she said, she goes, probably I'd give it a few days just to make sure they weren't faking it. And then, and then if it continued on, I would probably take them. So, so she takes the dog the same day. She would wait a few days to see how it panned out with the kid before she sought help for the kid. I said, and how long was it that you hesitated before you actually took that next step for yourself? She just looked at me and her face just dropped. She goes, about 2 years. And I went, yeah, I know, right? So we don't pay attention to what's going on with us. And I think this is the great shame of it. And we really need to, because in our late 40s and in our 50s, like, ladies, we've still got another 30, 40, 50 years to live. So we are not old ladies. So if you're feeling like anything less than vibrant and energetic and, confident in your own skin and happy in your own skin, it's a long time to put up with that.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, so these are sort of some of the things that start to happen during perimenopause.
Well, that is so fascinating, and thank you for sharing that. I understood some of that to a certain degree, but you illustrated it very well. So thank you for walking us through that. Now, I have questions about so why hormonally does sleep become an issue? Because that is such a huge thing. What do you see? What have you seen in your clients, and what's happening? Why are we waking up now in the middle of the night? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, so there's a few things going on. So one is that drop in progesterone. So that can, because again, if we think of progesterone as that calming, soothing, almost like a sedative. So we've lost that progesterone. So that's gone. So that can keep us up. Also too, like, we do become more as our estrogen drops. So estrogen is very protective of certain things. So it protects our bones against osteoporosis. We all know that. It also protects our cardiovascular system, so, it helps our heart health. But what they don't sort of talk about is it also helps prevent insulin resistance. So that estrogen helps stabilize our blood sugar. So what happens in perimenopause is we can have this, if we've got instabilities in our blood sugar, it becomes worse during perimenopause, and then certainly worse during menopause. But, it does a few different things. One of them is it signals our body to store fat. And the other one is it can wake us up during the night because our blood sugar has gone from a high, particularly if you're an after dinner snacker. You've gone to bed with high blood sugar. During the night, that blood sugar drops and it can wake you up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so there's sort of two things.
Those two things. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then you layer stress over the top. So if we're carrying this great big load and we're doing all these things and our brains are ticking over 1,000,000 miles an hour, so we've got this busy brain, that I call, you wired but tired. So, you want to go to sleep, but, you've got this head that's ticking over. So there's sort of three sort of the key reasons why sleep can be such a big problem.
Wow, that is fascinating. And then what happens? I mean, I see with women getting into their mid 40s that they're surprised. And I think this has to do with the blood sugar, is they start craving sweets more.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that becoming more what I would say sugar sensitive, like that if they eat
Yes.
sugar, they want it, they're craving it more, maybe
Yeah.
drinking as well, alcohol, or
Yeah.
like struggling with that maybe a little more. And again, maybe that has to do with managing stress. Maybe it also has to do with
Yeah.
this instability of insulin, and that kind of feeds upon
Yeah.
itself. I don't know. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah. 100%, 100%. So if your blood sugar isn't stable, if you crave sweet things, if you crave carby sort of things, even things like dairy. So if you're craving cheese or even meat for some women,
Hmm.
those cravings, are indicative of a blood sugar imbalance. And likewise, if you can't go 3 hours without eating, and then the minute you eat you actually feel fine, that shows that there's a problem as well.
Mm.
um, so it's sort of looking at all of those, but the flip side is if you haven't slept well, it messes with your appetite hormones.
Oh,
So
right.
we've got these hormones that tell us that we're full and tell us that we're hungry. So if we haven't slept well, it throws out those hormones. So the hormone that tells us that we're full, so leptin, that is suppressed. So that's
Yeah.
why we keep going. We keep going. We don't feel satisfied. So it's sort of this vicious cycle. So the
Yes.
bad sleep creates can create the cravings. The cravings
Yes.
throw out the blood sugar. The blood sugar throws out the sleep. So you sort of
It
on that.
just you go down that rabbit hole. Uh,
Yeah.
what are there some things our listeners could start to do to help, you know, make some balance or find some balance, just, you know, over,
Yeah.
run of the mill, it's like first step sort of thing that they could
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. 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 So first step, and this one's always, I don't know your stance on fasting, but this is for all my fasting lovers.
No, there's quite a few fasting people in
Yeah.
our audience. I think we're
Yeah.
all starting to see the value of fasting, and
Yeah.
I always
Look,
say, from a thin thinking standpoint, instead of trying not to eat, fasting is actually active and doing something and focusing the brain on something powerful rather than this idea of
yeah.
like trying not to. So
Yeah.
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 So tell us
Yeah.
about fasting.
Well, I always upset the fasters with this.
Uh-oh.
Is look, fasting there are some enormous benefits to fasting, 100%. But
Yeah.
I think where it doesn't work for women, and
Mm.
the all the research on fasting and the benefits of fasting are done on 30-year-old men.
Well, that
Okay.
figures.
Yeah, I know, right? So, and the reason that they don't do this testing on and they don't do the trials on women is because of these fluctuating hormones. So
Oh,
we are not a stable candidate in the
right.
researchers' eyes. So it's easier to do the research on men because of the stable hormones. So what they've found with women is, and if we go back to sort of our stress hormones now, cortisol, namely, is our
Right.
cortisol it's naturally higher in the morning because it's
Mm-hmm.
designed to get us up out of bed and get us going for the day. And it's
Mm-hmm.
naturally lower at night. So because it's winding us down, relaxing us, ready for sleep. So when I work with clients, the first thing I do is get you sorted with breakfast. So when
Mm.
you wake up in the morning and your cortisol levels are high, let's get some protein into your body. So,
Mm.
and I do it within 30 minutes to an hour of waking up to
Okay.
have
Interesting.
breakfast.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if we're fasting, we're actually better off skipping the evening meal because
Mm-hmm.
that's when our cortisol, our stress levels are at their lowest. So
Yeah.
for women, like there's always this, oh, just skip breakfast and start eating at lunchtime. But for women who are feeling tired, if you've got low energy, if you're not sleeping well, I highly recommend eating breakfast with some protein
Earlier.
in it
Yeah.
early and just flip it on its head and see how you feel. Because
That's very interesting. I love that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
fascinating. So the protein, the amino acids in the protein
yeah.
counterbalance with the cortisol, or they interact together, or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if we think of like protein as the anchor for your blood sugar.
mm-hmm.
So if you have a juice, piece of toast,
Right, something carby.
a coffee, and some cereal, yeah, that's going to shoot your blood sugar really high. And 2 hours later, you're going to be looking for more food.
Right.
So if you think of that, whereas if you have, a piece of sourdough toast, you have some avocado, you have some spinach and some eggs, that's going to get you through until lunchtime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you think of, so I always, say protein and fat are the anchor for your blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
keeps you fuller for longer, and it gets you through until the next meal.
So, so that is interesting. So stabilize early with protein and some fat. Um, what are some other little like tools that you could do later in the day with regards to sleep or
Yeah.
stress?
Yeah. So definitely in regard to sleep, again, if we want to keep that blood sugar stable through the night, is definitely stop the night snacking. So the night
Yes.
snacking, that really messes with your blood sugar. So,
So
I
fast
always say
after
to my
dinner.
after dinner, yeah. And you can get the benefits of a 12-hour fast. Like that will give you, because fasting, the whole idea of it is it gives your digestive system a break. So
Yes.
you don't have more food coming in. So your stomach gets a break, your intestines get a break, your liver gets a break,
Mm-hmm.
everything just gets 12 hours off. So if you finish dinner at, 8 o'clock at night, and then you have breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, you've done a 12-hour fast. You've
Yeah.
got the benefit of those 12 hours. So from a blood sugar point of view, if you have include some, protein, include some healthy fats, and include some like plant-based carbs. And I think, and again, carbs are quite controversial,
Right.
but we've got there's carbs and then there's carbs. So the
Yeah.
carbs that I, recommend to all of my clients is, plant-based.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking sweet potato or kumara, we're thinking pumpkin, brown rice,
Mm-hmm.
quinoa, anything sort of plant-based. If it comes from a packet, it's not a carb you want to have.
Right.
So if you think of, packet carbs, they're the ones that are going to, so your cookies, your chocolates, your
Your pastas,
candy,
your, yeah,
pastas, all of that. So they're going
white
to
food.
shoot your blood. Yeah, but if it grew,
If it
so
grows,
if it grows, then that's a good carb to eat.
okay. If it grows, it's a go.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so 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 that's great. That's a great I love that because that's very doable, right? Protein in the
Yeah,
morning, fast at night. I mean, not
yeah,
that, oh, fast at night, easier said than done, I know. But I mean that
yeah,
concept is something that can be really simple and something
yeah.
people could. Now, we haven't talked about this. I mean, if you had another thing, I want to hear it. But there was one thing I want to ask you too about memory. I was like, what am I trying to? What did I want to ask you about?
What was
Oh, right, that
that?
thing that I. Oh, it was
Yeah.
so funny because before I turned on record, I think I forgot three things in a row, and and why does our memory fade? Like, or why do we have such a hard time with our memory? Is it the estrogen thing
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, definitely. So at the extreme end, we've got estrogen, being protective of our bones, our heart, our blood sugar, also protects us from dementia as well.
Okay.
So not to say that we've got dementia at this point, but it is very protective, and there's more and more research coming out about the link between when you've got insulin, blood sugar irregularities that lead to insulin resistance, which lead to type 2 diabetes, and they're having a look at there's a really strong link, and they're actually in sort of sciencey world, they're actually referring to dementia as type 3 diabetes.
I've heard that. That's so
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, it is. And I think it's really important for women to understand the implications. But with the memory loss, I think it's a multi-factor of things. Because we've got so much on our plate that just one other thing that we need to put in our brain is too much.
Yes.
That overwhelm feeling that I was talking about before this is really common, and this is a hormonal thing. So it's just we've lost that estrogen, we've got low progesterone, and our body, it's like a natural recalibration. So, transitioning through perimenopause and menopause is actually, we're supposed to do it. It's a natural transition. So we aren't meant to be having babies in our 80s.
Right.
So when we get these sort of symptoms either through perimenopause or once we've been through perimenopause, so when we haven't had a menstrual cycle for a year, that's when we're in menopause. So and 30% of women will beautifully sail through with no symptoms, they'll barely even notice. The 30% will go through with debilitating symptoms that interrupt their every day, and then the rest of us will just sort of cruise somewhere through the middle. So it's important to recognize that it doesn't last forever, and it is something that we will go through. We're meant to go through it, and we can come out the other side, and it's actually quite liberating to come out the other side.
Oh, yeah.
Because where you are in life, your kids are less dependent, you're ideally a bit more financially free, you're more time free because you're not driving those kids everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a next stage of life, and it's actually quite exciting. But you can tell I've got perimenopause brain as well. So going back to the whole memory loss thing, I think it's the big load that we're carrying. It's definitely that drop in estrogen and that change in hormones for sure. But it's just, and it can definitely be, tired, exhausted from not sleeping well. It can be those blood sugar ups and downs. It can be, so our hormones are never just one hormone. They're all connected. So if one thing is out, it's got this cascade effect that knocks everything out. But the flip side of that is once we improve one thing, we also improve everything. So,
it can, you can start to build up and you'll feel the effects more quickly because one thing is going to build upon another thing.
100%. So if we improve your sleep, you're going to have more energy. You're going to have less of those sort of carby cravings. So you're going to have a better control, and you are going to feel more in control because all of a sudden, you slept better, so you feel better, and you're more likely to make better choices, whether that's with food or to get out and exercise and move your body. So when you're feeling tired, lethargic, you haven't slept well, you kind of go for foods that you try and pick you up. We're less likely to exercise because we're tired. We're less likely to socialize. We're doing less, but then we can flip that around. And if we are feeling more energetic, we make better food choices. We choose to move our body. We choose that social connection as well. And I think that's sort of one thing I've really noticed since, COVID and lockdowns is so many women have lost that desire, I guess, to socialize, or it just seems too hard, and it's easier for us just to stay home. So but I think
we got out of the habit.
From a mental point of view and for our emotional well-being, we really need to make those social connections, and again that sets off our endorphins, which are our happy hormones, and it makes us feel better about ourselves. So so it's all connected, and I find it endlessly fascinating. And like I said, no two women are the same. So I always love kind of like pulling it all together for women, and sort of, okay, well, this is where we need to start with you, and we'll work on this bit. and then
That
the
must be
cascade
very
effect is huge.
gratifying to take women kind of on this journey from one place to another. And I
Yeah,
imagine when they come, not only feeling sort of disconnected from themselves as they knew, but like I said, it's almost a mourning process, letting go of that old idea
yeah,
of themselves and sort of rebirthing into, I mean,
yeah.
this sounds very California woo-woo, but I mean, like kind of going through, like I know
Yeah,
I did. I mean, I've been in menopause for years and years and years. Um, but when I went through it, it was a shock to, it's always like, oh my gosh, this is actually
yeah,
happening to me. And then
yeah,
um, and sort of a sadness of like, oh, okay, that time in my
yeah,
life is sort of done. And now I'm kind
yeah,
of redefining who I am and what I am and and like you said, you come out the other side and you're like, wow, this is really awesome.
yeah,
Actually, if you are feeling good and you are feeling happy and vibrant and have taken care of your body and are
yeah.
taking care of yourself, it's an amazing time of your life. But yeah, I see it's such a like you said, there's just so multifaceted that if one thing gets out of place, then the trickle down happens seemingly very
Oh,
quickly, and it can be easy to
very
beat
fast.
yourself up about it, to feel like
Yeah,
you've got it wrong, that and you're all
yeah,
alone in it, and nobody
yeah,
understands, especially your husband or your kids, or like you probably
yeah,
feel it must be gratifying to bring women together in this way too, like in your groups to
yeah.
like connect them as well.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think, we're so conditioned to, like, if we're not feeling good about ourselves, and we're our own worst judges. So the first thing we sort of think of is weight. It's like, oh, I need to lose weight. I don't feel good about myself. I need to shift some weight. So we're conditioned and have been, like, for all of us who grew
Hmm.
up in the 70s
Ah,
and 80s,
yes.
we need to kind of go on some kind of diet. We need to go on some kind of restriction. We need to punish ourselves with exercise.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like the worst approach when it comes to our hormones. Whereas if we actually step back, we show ourselves some kindness and just go, you know what, I need to support my hormones. I need to,
Mm,
we're never taught to do that either. But what I'm saying is, when you start to support your blood sugar, when you start to manage your stress, when you start to, and stress is a weird one, because we can't always control the way or the amount of stress around us, but we can control the way we respond to it, because
right.
stress is it's perceived. It's our perception of the
Hmm.
situation. So it's changing that perception, which then changes the our
The
response to it.
response in your body, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So then it's sort of just coming at it from a different perspective. So we're coming at it from we need to nourish ourselves. We need to rest. It's okay to rest. It's okay to replenish ourselves. And when we come at it from that angle, as opposed to a diet approach to lose weight,
Hmm.
we're supporting our hormones, we're nourishing ourselves, and then that is part of resetting our metabolism and making us feel better about ourselves as a whole. So we're more confident, we're more energized, we're more, we're sleeping better. When we focus on those things as opposed to just weight,
Hmm.
it's, and I can see it, the lights go off with my clients, when I work with them. I can
Yes.
see it when they go, this is what it was missing.
Yeah. Well, it's like a reframe. You start to look at it
Yeah,
from a self-care and self-nourishing perspective rather than I'm not good enough and I need to measure up and I have
yeah,
to diet and punish myself. I love
yeah.
that.
Or
That's
I
so
feel
fantastic.
guilt, and I feel guilt, or I feel shame because I didn't stick to it, or I failed. And yeah, so to
Right.
move
Yeah.
out of that is amazing.
Yeah. Wow, this has been so fascinating. And I know that people, having heard you, will want to hear more or know more about this. And I know you're offering everybody something to take away for free. Can you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about your offer here?
Yeah, sure. So I have a free ebook, which I would love to gift to you all as a thank you for listening. And a thank you to Rita for having me on the show. Is stress sabotaging your weight loss? So what I've done in there is I've sort of talked about a little bit about how, it's not you. It's not that you've got the wrong diet. It's not that you're not doing
Right.
the right exercise. It's, perhaps it's stress that's causing, all of these, or
Challenges,
and blocking you from,
weight
losing the
loss.
weight that you would like to lose. So, so in there, I just give you, a whole list of ideas that you can do. And I encourage you to choose one or two that resonate with you. You don't have to do, there's like 100 ideas in the book, but just choose a couple every single day. And it's a gift that you can give to yourself every single day just to calm those stress hormones. And, so you can then, you're giving that to yourself.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. I can't wait to have a look at it myself. And so that will be in the show notes. And if you get my emails, I will also put that link in the email so that you can download Kylie's Kylie's ebook. Kylie, we'll have to have you back on to talk more about this because this is such a
Yeah.
fascinating topic. I mean, because the hormones, you could just like go on for days and days
Oh,
about it. And I'm
I
sure
feel
you
like I've
do.
jumped. I could talk for days
We've
and months
just
and years.
touched the tip
I
of
feel
the
like I've
iceberg.
Oh, totally. I feel like I've just scratched the surface and we have jumped
Yeah.
around a lot. So if you're listening, thinking, where's
Yeah,
she going
and
now?
yet it seemed very cohesive. You obviously know your stuff, and it's very and you present it in a very fascinating way and interesting way. So thank you for coming on and opening up our eyes to this part of our lives
Yeah.
that is so predominant, really, for most of us. I don't know if you're heading into it. I hope that if you're heading into perimenopause in the next decade or so, I hope this has made you feel like, okay, it's going to be okay. And
Yeah,
if you're in
yeah.
it, I hope this has enlightened you. And if you're past it, you're like, oh, good, I don't have to go through that anymore. But I have one last question for you because I am
Yeah,
in
sure.
menopause. I'm
Yeah.
57 going on 58. And I wonder, like, then after when you're in menopause, then you are left with less estrogen,
Yeah.
less progesterone. Those levels are
Yes.
very, very low now, right? Like I'm at a
That's
very low
correct.
level. Yeah, yeah. Unless
Yeah, yeah,
you
that's
I mean, like we don't have to get into that. I was going to ask, like, do you? Because I don't like take extra
yeah.
hormones or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. That's a great question. And look, it's the hormone replacement therapy options available now are very, very different to what was
mhm,
available 20 years ago. And I think there was a big scare about 20 years ago because the results of this study came out that hormone replacement therapy was linked with breast
cancer.
cancer.
Yeah.
Now, I just will quickly, I could talk about this for days and days as well. So, just
Mm,
quickly, those, the hormones that they used in that study were very, very high dose estrogen. And it was
mhm,
actually equine estrogen. So, it was
right.
horse estrogen.
Mm,
So, and it was way in a much higher dose than we actually need. Now, what's available now is, and not all doctors are across this because it is like relatively new, but we've got bioidentical hormones available to us. So we
mhm.
can have really low dose estrogen, really low dose progesterone that are bioidentical, and the risk is really minimal. So it's a GP or a doctor prescription, and it's available to all of us. But doctors don't understand. Some are across it. There's some
Hmm.
great doctors out there, but not all of them are across it. So I really, and that's a big part of what I do too, is educating women so you can make informed
Make
choices.
those choices.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. So if you have questions, I'll put your website and your information if people have questions for you. Can they contact you?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And yeah, I also have a Facebook group called the Hormone Hub. It's peri-menopause, menopause support. So if you're in that zone and you would like to find out more about your hormones, then definitely come and join us in the Facebook group.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I'll have to get that link from you as well. So thank you so much for coming on today, Kylie. It was so great to
Yeah,
get to
my
know you
pleasure.
and
Yeah,
to get to know
definitely.
your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Rita, for having me. Thanks,
Oh,
everyone, for listening. All right. Don't you just love Kylie? She's got such a powerful and cool energy. And please grab a copy of her free guide, Hormone Healthy Foods, in the show notes of this episode. And just check out that Facebook group she mentioned as well. So have an amazing week. And remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlocking the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it. Do you want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release? Head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you'll find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking, Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss.